Hey, everybody, and happy almost end of August. We are
Ooh.
here today for a very popular topic, something people ask us all the time, which is what drives threat actors? Why do they want to break in besides money? And it's a topic that comes up when Mike and I are at conferences. It's a topic that comes up in a lot of different ways. And today we're actually going to be able to give you a maybe a little different spin on it than what you have heard before. Um, so the person who's going to give you that spin is Brad. Brad, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. It's a pleasure to have you all here. My name is Brad Swanson. I've been a member of the Critical Insight family for almost 2 years now. I work at CI as a VCSO, providing VCSO services to our clients. Also do a lot of gap analysis, audit prep work, focus security assessments, things like that. Um, I kind of specialize in doing critical infrastructure, but also schools and manufacturing facilities. Here at CI, we like to help people make the world a better place for everybody else. I've been doing this for about 29 years now, all told. So,
It's in the last presentation. It said 27 years, and I realized that that slide was from when he started. So I made him update it to 29 years. This is a very important part of today's webinar. Also joining us, Mike Hamilton and Fred Langston, who founded the company. Mike is currently our CISO. Fred is our Chief Product Officer, and my name is Jake Melstein. I run all of our events. I run marketing. And so as we go, if you have questions and the like, go ahead and put them in the chat on the right. Everyone's going to get a recording of this. And as Brad mentioned, if you don't know us, we defend critical services against cyber attacks. We do that by helping organizations prepare for a cyber attack through risk assessments and pen tests and policy development, and the work that Brad does as a VCSO. Um, we help organizations detect an attack quickly through managed detection response, which is SOC as a service. So we see attacks come in and then respond. We help organizations respond decisively to attacks to kick that attacker out. So, look, we all know that there's no 100% way to keep the attackers out. And as you hear today, what the threat actors are all about, you'll hear why. They're pretty good at what they do. And so, being able to respond decisively to an attack, to make sure that the impact of that attack is really small is what we help orgs do. So if you all in the chat can let us know where you're joining from, we'd love to know where people are from. And today, what we're going to talk about is okay, who did we talk with? And Brad talked to a bunch of people to get the information for this presentation, and he asked them what drives them. Talk to them. We'll give you the example interviews, and then what does the future look like there, and then Q&A. And if you've ever been to our events, the funniest thing about Q&A is really we just do Q&A throughout. So put questions in the chat as we go. And my favorite thing to do is to interrupt the folks talking, which means that it's time for somebody else to talk. Brad, to you, sir.
awesome. Thanks, Jake. Again, thank you, everybody, for joining. So who do we talk with? We hear a lot about, hey, this is what threat actors are after. This is why they're doing this. But a lot of the times we hear that from security companies. We wanted to talk to the threat actors themselves. We had Hacker Summer Camp here in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, DEF CON, Black Hat, B-Sides. And you have a whole mix of people at that. And we thought, why not take advantage of that and speak with some of these people and find out what actually drives them and kind of get it from the horse's mouth. So we talked to some members of some old school hacking groups that we've known from back in the day. A lot of us got our start kind of as gray hats or explorers, as it were, before a lot of this stuff was illegal. And so we still know a lot of folks from those times. We also talked to some lone wolf actors, people that acted on their own. They weren't part of a larger organized group. We talked to some new people. What got you into this recently? You haven't been in this for 30 years. What made you suddenly decide to get into the black hat side of hacking? Some of these individuals that we spoke with have been caught and prosecuted for their crimes. Some have not. One of the individuals that we're going to talk about actually went to a non-extradition country to avoid charges. We're going to talk kind of a little bit about why that matters as well. So what actually drives these threat actors that we're seeing today? There's acceptance. They want to be part of something bigger, or they have a low self-esteem. They want to be accepted by their peers. Respect, same type of thing. They do things, they do righteous hacks to get respect from these groups and from their peers. Hacktivism. You see a lot of activists now that are conducting digital attacks to kind of further their message. So we're going to talk a little bit about what drives them and kind of what their thought process is. Revenge. Revenge is a big one. We see it between hacking groups. We've seen it between government agencies. We've seen it, the public against different organizations. So we'll discuss the revenge aspect. And then finally, money. We see a lot of attacks that are financially related. This includes things like ransomware and extortion and things like that. So we're going to discuss those a little more in depth as well.
And Mike, one of your big predictions from a few years ago was hacktivism would have a big rise.
Yep.
So no surprise to you that it's on this slide.
Hamilton is right again.
Go ahead, Brad.
So starting out, we'll talk a little bit about the acceptance and respect. So a lot of individuals that go into this lifestyle, a lot of them have a low self-esteem, and they need something to kind of help build themselves up. Many of us in the security field have imposter syndrome. It's a thing. Same thing happens with the malicious actors as well. They get the same imposter syndrome. They have the same low self-esteem. They feel they're not good enough by doing hacks. Now they can get respect. That gives value to who they are as a person. We see a lot of people get their start in the gaming community. They'll write hacks for games, or they'll write bots that will allow them to cheat at the game. Or in some cases, we talked to an individual that was doing like distributed denial of service against the people he was playing games against. So he could shoot them before they could shoot him, type of thing. A lot of times these folks are very socially awkward. They don't really interact in person very well. They can be introverted. Not always, but they can be. And so they choose to interact online through the internet, through chat rooms, through various forums. And they might be willing to break other laws to get that respect. Could be breaking into a phone truck and stealing a butt set, or, old bell manuals, back in the day, or what have you. Could be breaking and entering into a facility. We have a lot of people that do physical penetration tests as part of their day-to-day jobs. The bad guys will do the same thing. That's why we do physical penetrations, is to see how secure a company's physical security is. And so it's to kind of prevent what these folks are trying to do. Or they'll commit fraud. They'll do fraudulent things and embezzle money. They will try and change bank accounts. I'll send an email to your HR department saying, hey, this is so-and-so. I've changed my banking info. Send my paycheck here instead. That's all fraud. But it's something that we're seeing an uptick in for sure.
Yeah, I remember back in the OG days, we didn't have online games, but it was all about cracking software and using pirated software. And then the P2P networks came around, and we all thought we were, great criminals because we were downloading free music and things like that. It was a little tamer back then than it is now, but it started the same way.
Yeah, a lot of us kind of cut our teeth, working for courier groups and, moving pirated software around. And it was not as, I feel it was not as malicious back then as it is now. Now it's direct attacks and,
you made the point too about there not being any laws back then. That's one thing that kept us all out of jail.
Yep, exactly. So hacktivism and revenge. Hacktivism has really taken off. We've seen a lot of hacktivism, and a lot of it is tied to activism. We see, we see groups like Anonymous. and they go out. I'm sorry. They go out and they hack different sites. If they feel that somebody has wronged the internet community or somebody has wronged Anonymous, they're going to start a campaign against that group. We had the shooting of Michael Brown in St. Louis a number of years back. We had the George Floyd shooting in Minneapolis. These are all things where the police departments then get targeted for this hacktivism and for this revenge. Hacktivists are typically part of a larger group or movement, like Anonymous, for example, or they could be part of a group that does a lot of in-person protests, but they might have a couple of people that are doing hacktivism activities as well. They really honestly believe in the goal of the group. They feel that, yeah, what we're doing is illegal, but we're on the right side of morality. So it's okay to break the law if we're doing something that's morally righteous, regardless of if their actions really are morally righteous or not. It's a way that they can kind of make themselves feel better about breaking the law. Revenge is typically personal. We see that between different groups. We see it could be against an individual. If somebody squeals or narcs on a hacking group, that hacking group might, dox that individual. Could be against another malicious group or a threat actor. Back in the old days, we had like LOD and MOD, two different hacking groups, constantly at war with each other. These types of attacks can take many forms. It could be doxing. It could be releasing another group's tools. We recently saw where the CIA's tools were leaked, and then the NSA's tools were leaked shortly thereafter. You can draw your own conclusions from that, but it's really kind of a widespread issue that we see. Mike, do you have any thoughts about hacktivism?
I actually think this is the one thing, when we talk about terrorism, okay, for example, the one thing they say that is really hard to control is the lone wolf. These groups are really hard to get your arms around. And there's a number of them right now that are all involved in, let's say, more geopolitical causes. And as we get closer to the next election, there is going to be political activism coming out, people with skills. And we may see things like, I don't know, just the way that we conduct presidential elections in this country. In this, we use this artifact of the 18th century called the Electoral College, where if you were able to disrupt the election operation going on in maybe 3 key counties in the United States, you've swung an election. And this is, I think, what we're going to see. And in fact, I'm working with, in our state, on election security committee, talking about things like that. But there's a group called Unicorn Riot. And what they do is they steal embarrassing documentation from politicians, from law enforcement, make all that public. There is the, about Anonymous, about the Ukrainian cyber army, the Belarusian cyber patriots. You may have heard of Killnet in Russia, which is interesting because it's an amalgam of low-skilled individuals and really high-skilled criminals that are acting for, patriotic reasons. And then you got these just crazy ones. Like there's one in India called the Goodwill Ransomware Gang, and they will hit your corporation, your organization with ransomware. And their extortion is that if you want to get your network back, prove to us that you bought food for poor kids. No kidding. So, these groups and the skills that the younger generation has because they've been raised on computers, you're born with a phone in your hand now. When they decide that they're going to take one side or another of an issue, they're going to bring skills to bear. So this is the one that's going to blow up.
And so, and I have a question also for the audience. If anybody in the audience has ever been in an organization that's been specifically targeted, I mean, I know I talked.
I have.
I talked to a hospital in the last year where they sort of inadvertently got themselves in the middle of the abortion discussion.
Mm.
And all of a sudden we're curious about, hey, what's happening on the dark web? Is anybody talking about us? What do we need to be worried about? And those kinds of discussions. Fred, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were going to say?
Yeah, I wanted to cover the revenge component of this, because while we usually think of revenge as somebody who was wronged by a corporation, they try to hack in, the biggest revenge threat is the insider threat, where you've got a disgruntled employee, somebody felt that the company or their boss has done them wrong, and they leave a logic bomb, or they leave with the credentials, the famous City of San Francisco network that was hostage for 18 months because the guy wouldn't share the credentials, went to court, never got the credentials out of him. They had to rebuild everything from scratch. And then there's also people that will work with an external hacking group when they leave. I'm angry, but I'm not going to do it. But I'm going to tell them about what's going on inside that company and point them to assets that they might want to attack. So there's revenge can happen in a whole bunch of ways, but probably the one that most people need to think about is that insider threat revenge.
Yeah, and to Fred's point, this is why it's so important. We talk about this in the security awareness trainings that we conduct for clients. It's so important that you have your employees and your staff with the right level of authentication. You don't want to give them keys to the kingdom if they don't need it for just that reason. It makes it that much more easy for them to commit revenge if they have access to everything under the sun when they don't need it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's I actually was just talking to somebody who, so for folks who know me, I used to work in newsrooms, and I talked to somebody who used to work in a newsroom, and, they had somebody depart for a rival TV station, but before they left, they made themselves logins to the systems. And so when they went to the other TV station, they were just looking at looking at what was going to lead the newscast on their former station every day. And nobody figured it out for about a year. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, you got to watch out.
Yeah. I'll tie that off by just telling you that, yes, when I worked for the city of Seattle, those are back in the days when every other week the Seattle Police Department was above the fold for not a good reason. And the denial of service attack would come right after that. It's that activism thing is real.
yeah, and it's just going to increase, I fear, as we move forward. So money, a lot of malicious actors are in it just for the money. They'll use things like ransomware or extortion or blackmail to try and get that money out of you or your company. They are really taking off after critical infrastructure because they know that payment is probably going to come from these particular places: hospitals, water treatment facilities, power stations, cities. It's crucial that these places are able to provide services to their clients. If you have a hospital and the power goes out, or all of a sudden every device in that hospital has been ransomwared, they can't save lives. And so they want to get their network back online as quickly as possible. Sometimes that's paying the ransom and hoping the best for that decryption key that you get. If you do pay the ransom, I believe the statistic is something like 19% of the people that paid the ransom never got their data back. Once they give you that key and you try it, and if it doesn't work for some reason, you reach back out to them and say, hey, your key didn't work to fix this. They don't care. They got their money. They're off to the next victim. So ransomware is really, really damaging. And it's why they use it, because it works. Their goal is to make money while they can. And they will often throw somebody under the bus. If they get caught, there's no group loyalty really there to speak of. They will throw people under the bus and try and save their own skins. So a lot of nervousness. It's very hard to deal with these organizations. We highly recommend that you use a specific group to do the negotiations for you. You don't want to negotiate with ransomware operators on your own.
I think, and when we think about these ransomware operators, sometimes we're talking about a gang, sometimes we're talking about a nation state, and we've seen increasingly disgusting tactics to get the money. There's the case in Texas, I believe Texas, where a school district got hit by ransomware and they did not pay the ransom. And so the bad guys started calling the parents and saying, hey, we're going to release your kids' information. You better call the school district and tell them that they need to pay us. There's another where they started releasing photos of women, who were dealing with breast cancer, and saying, hey, you better call the organization to get them. I mean, really awful, awful stuff. And just this week, actually, a school district here in Washington State got hit by ransomware in February. And then this week, the group that hit them, called Akira, put out a notice saying, since they haven't paid a ransom, we're going to start, selling the data. They say selling the data, releasing the data. I forget what they said, Mike. But, they're using all of these, they're using all these, terrible, terrible things to just make more money.
Yeah. And the recent one I know about is because I got pulled into this, somebody down in LA from a news station that had to have somebody help understand this, was a plastic surgeon's office. And they stole all of the before and after pictures of plastic surgery patients. And that was bad. But just, the money aspect of this, globally, $8 trillion lost last year to cybercrime. That makes it the third largest economy in the world. These people are making so much money. How do you dissuade people from making easy money like this? And it's reasonably low risk. I mean, yeah, we're starting to capture and incarcerate a few of these people, if they're in a country with an extradition treaty, but there hasn't really been any kind of a deterrent to doing this. And these people are making money hand over fist. You can always just rely on the gullibility of the person sitting behind the computer to, give up the farm and make sure these people keep making money.
Yeah, and Fred, one of the things that we used to talk about sort of before ransomware became, the thing, was, the cost of a record, right? If you, and that health records are worth more than others. Is that still a thing, or is it just they're making so much money on ransomware, the cost of a record is just not as important anymore, or, they're just making money on both? Like, what's the, how do criminals look at that?
They love them both. They love them both. Right now, a healthcare record is above $200 per record at a loss. Now, most of those costs are going to remediation, recovery, all those sorts of things, breach notification. But at the front end of that, there's a huge ransom, right? So, it's changed. So, and they're gonna look at any one of those motivators are good enough for them to go after you.
And let's say you get hit by a ransomware criminal, and ransomware criminal says, hey, $5 million to unlock the network, and you pay $5 million to unlock the network. And let's say it works. It works. You're one of the lucky ones, and it works. And then they say, hey, it's another $5 million to get your data back.
Yeah.
And you pay that. Are you then to believe that they're not going to put that data on the dark web?
No, that I would be willing to bet that data will, in a short order, end up on the dark web. They may not release it directly, but they'll broker it to somebody else. There's a whole dark web, trading economy that happens, and they'll trade those records for something else, and eventually they'll pop up someplace else. Those never disappear into the ether and go away. I mean, it's cash, right? It's going to be monetized long after they've told you they destroyed your data. So
right, and
the
you
other
have
part
to
of
go on their
it,
word too.
Purely their word, and which is crazy.
Bad.
And it's not just records.
For them. I was going to say, it's not uncommon for them to post data that they have stolen to show proof of that they have your data, but you have to look closely, because sometimes that data might be sales data. And while it's maybe embarrassing, it's not a crime. You don't have to notify. It's not personal identifiable information, but they'll make you feel like it is. And they'll certainly want to, hurt your reputation with those partners. But you have to judge what the quality of that data is to see whether you actually want to even play the game with them.
And for those of you that don't have client records like that, you're still in danger. They'll go after your IP. If you're a manufacturing company, for example, they want that intellectual property, and they will grab that just as quickly as a record of a client too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And in particular, we deal with a lot of the space, companies that enable, rocket launches and satellites and all that sort of thing. And the U.S. government came out and said they are being highly targeted for intellectual property right now. In fact, the Chinese are pushed to their intellectual property theft against our American space industry right now. So there's all the reasons that exist. Stealing IP as a nation state, stealing IP and then reselling it, ransoming data, ransoming, systems, all of them are just ways to turn it into money, right? So,
and ransomware, we're seeing an increase year over year of ransomware. And part of that is because they've come out with ransomware as a service. It used to be you have to have a little bit of coding skills and a little bit of knowledge of how systems work to be able to write ransomware. Now you can just buy a pre-made ransomware product and pay them X amount of dollars up front or X amount for each ransom. And any entry-level individual now can launch a ransomware attack. So
yeah, and again, as political season comes up,
my
that's going to be
favorite-
awful attractive.
no.
Yeah, and my favorite thing is to show people dark websites, then show them they look just like buying off Amazon. I mean, it looks like your interface is buying something off Amazon, except you check out with Bitcoin instead of a credit card. You order things, it's got drop-down menus. I mean, it's literally like shopping on Amazon, right? That's
And you can
all you
order
have to
credit
do.
cards.
Yeah, right, exactly.
All righty, so we're going to talk a little bit about some different individuals that we know that we've spoken with, and we're going to kind of touch on a couple of different areas. So we're going to go back in time a little bit for this first one. We talked a little bit about how a lot of us did stuff before there were laws against it, and this is a group like that, the 414s. The 414s were pretty famous. They were a group of explorer scouts in the greater Milwaukee area, hence the name, the 414s. 414 is a Milwaukee area code. And they just wanted to explore and discover stuff. And they got computers, and they had, like this drive to just explore networks. So they got into a bunch of different networks, Sloan Kettering, Los Alamos, a bunch of different banks. And they would just look around. They didn't have malicious intent. They weren't loading ransomware out. It didn't exist back then. This is in the early to mid 80s. They just wanted to see how stuff worked. I'm sure a lot of us used to take stuff apart to see how it worked when we were kids. Same type of thing. How does this internet thing work? How does this network work? They just wanted to look at things, but they didn't want to get caught either and lose their fun exploration. So they wiped some log files, or so they thought they were wiping log files. It turns out they wiped a bunch of billing records at Sloan Kettering, and it's about $1,500 in damages, which in mid 1980s money is a good chunk. And so they got arrested. 3 of them were arrested out of the group. But back then, there were no laws about hacking. So they ended up charging them with making harassing phone calls, because that was the only law in the book. They're like, they used a telephone to do this modem thing to get into this network, so it must have been a harassing phone call. They actually went in front of the House of Representatives, talked about the dangers of hacking, and actually helped the government develop like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and other various laws to be able to address hacking as it happened moving forward. None of them got prison time. They all got probation. They had to pay back the $1,500 to Sloan Kettering and to promise, pinky swear to not do any of this stuff anymore. But that was kind of one of the early groups. And it was that curiosity thing, just wanting to explore and discover new things. Then we've got an individual, Daniel Plasek. He also went by Nosen, Logie, Juggernaut, Mirror. And Daniel, at a young age, when he was still a teenager, had a computer science teacher. He was also from the greater Milwaukee area, Glendale, I believe. And And this teacher encouraged him, hey, learn how to write code, learn how to use computers. And Daniel really took that to heart. He was a gamer. He liked to play video games, but he didn't like to lose. So what Daniel started doing is writing bots for these games that would let him cheat at the game when he was playing online against other people. These bots worked really well. He was kind of a prodigy, kind of a natural coder. And so these bots moved into distributed denial of service tools. If Sarah's going to snipe me all the time and I keep losing to her, what can I do? I'm just going to drop her internet connection on her. We'll launch a DDoS attack against her. So she's got all this lag and I can sneak around behind her and get her. He eventually started a website called darkcode.com. And it was a forum for malicious actors to get together, talk about the projects that they were working on, and to trade some of the tools that they had written. He ran that for a while and then kind of moved away from it. Still was writing a lot of hacking tools. He was writing tools that were very, very proficient at what they did. His tools would just basically sit on a network, kind of as an actor in the middle, and watch traffic. And it would grab emails and passwords out of that traffic, credit card numbers, anything that looked interesting. It would grab them, dump them in a text file, and then the bad actor could go back and review that data later. A friend of his introduced him to a third party, said, hey, this third party would like to buy this tool from you. Daniel customized it for all of his buyers. He asked this individual, what do you want it to do? And the guy's like, it has to be able to grab usernames, passwords, and credit cards. Daniel wrote it. He's like, look, it grabs like 100,000 records a day off a busy network. It's a pretty solid tool. He sold it. I believe he sold it to this individual for $500. Lo and behold, this individual was an undercover FBI agent.
Oops.
Yep. And so everybody tried to cover their tracks. The way the FBI actually caught Daniel, he used a third-party service in the Caribbean for payment. So if I wanted to buy one of his tools, I would send $500 to this third-party service in the Caribbean. They would then take that money and forward it off to Daniel's actual bank account in the greater Milwaukee area. Problem is, when Daniel set up this third-party service in the Caribbean, he used his real name, his real phone number, and his real home address. When the FBI showed up with subpoenas for that information, obviously the third-party service said, here it is. It's Daniel Placek. Here's his address. Do you want to know what his birthday is? And so Daniel was arrested by the FBI. He served a year in jail, and then he was on probation for like 5 years after that. The FBI actually had Daniel going around to places like Facebook, Twitter, and doing educational presentations for him. Hey, this is how I would get into your network. This is how I would leverage your data to siphon it off. This is how I would decrypt things that you've got on your network, et cetera, et cetera. Daniel has turned over a new leaf. If you talk to Daniel today, he will tell you that he's learned his lesson and that he is not involved in hacking or writing tools anymore. Take that with a grain of salt. It's hard to break some of those habits, especially when you're making really, really good money off of it. But Daniel is an example of an individual, low self-esteem, wanted to be accepted by his peers. So he started writing bots for all these people that he knew in the gaming community, and it just spread out from there.
So that's a little bit like, they were a little more, I think, organized, but you remember the cult of the dead cow?
Yep.
And didn't they turn it? So their first product was called Back Orifice, right? And it was a way to take over. And I remember going to a training for CISSP training, or it was hacker training or something like that. And when the instructor left the room, we threw Back Orifice on his computer and started taking over the mouse and stuff while he was trying to talk. So, but didn't they end up being Loft Heavy Industries, and then after that became At Stake, right?
No, Loft was a separate group from CDC. CDC is still around. They're at DEF CON every year. Now they sell tennis shoes and T-shirts,
coins.
Loft actually started in Boston. CDC was out of can't remember the city. It was in Texas. It was a bunch of friends that worked at a slaughterhouse, and that's why they got the name Cult of the Dead Cow. And they're still active. Loft, those individuals are still around. They had like a hacker space in Boston, and they would go like to MIT and buy like all this old used gear and then hack around this old gear to get it fixed up and sell it. And their significant others were doing, I believe, like hats and T-shirts, like a screen printing operation. But yeah, and then Loft got into more of the security side of things, and then sold to At Stake,
Right.
and made a whole bunch of money. So,
And I will say, we don't know that Daniel. Daniel has said that he is no longer a criminal.
right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and nobody's seen evidence that he is still doing anything.
Yeah, many articles out there, but I think one of the most interesting parts of that story, Brad, is that he was really young when he started.
Yeah. He was, I believe, when he was arrested, he was only like 20 or 21 when he was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he was a kind of a young pup. But a lot of these threat actors are getting started younger and younger. The bar to entry is getting lower and lower. And like Hamilton mentioned, we're all born now with a cell phone in our hands. We have a computer right there, and we can start doing this stuff. And there's so many YouTube videos and so much information out on the internet gets kids started. So it's really important for us to guide them.
Yeah, I mean, when you put that up against the opportunities that young people think that they have today, this is a very attractive option, and we got to do something about that.
Yeah,
especially since AI can write malware now, and you don't even have
malware.
To be crappy but functional malware.
Yeah. So finally, we have a group. I'm only going to talk about 3 individuals in that group: Frodo, the Ninja Ferret, and Benny. This is a group that was a phone system group. They are based out of Central Illinois. They started out doing phone system stuff, and then they expanded into hacking into various systems. They've hacked into various like local municipalities as well as federal government systems. And their whole thing again was exploration, and then wanting to learn the dark art so they could get respect from some of these bigger groups. Like the CDCs and the Lofts of the world, the more famous groups, Anonymous and places like that. They just wanted recognition and to figure out how to make these folks like them. They eventually branched out to theft. They would hit phone trucks and grab bell manuals and butt sets. They would do dumpster diving. They'd break into locked dumpsters. When I was talking to Ferret, he was telling me a story about there was a phone company in a municipality, small local phone company, that would lock their dumpsters. They cut through the locks, got in the dumpsters, and got a printout of every account. This phone company was a Unix-based place. They ran Linux. They had a printout of every user account and password in plain text that they threw into their dumpster, not shredded or anything. Just here's a pile of paper. Well, the dumpster locks. We'll lock the dumpster. And so these individuals were able to get all that information. Now they have all these accounts on the network. They were IT people, so they all knew kind of, how systems worked. I always say that the best system administrators make the best security people because they know how the system works already, and that's kind of how these 3 got at it. Frodo and the Ferret kind of backed off a little bit. Benny went on and started writing ransomware and he didn't get caught. He was suspected of being the writer of some ransomware, of releasing it on some some municipalities' networks. Benny's parents were from Iran. They'd sent Benny to the U.S. to get an education, to better himself. Benny went back to Iran, and we can't touch him at this point because Iran, as we all know, is a non-extradition state. So it matters where these attacks come from. If they come from a non-extradition state, our hands get tied a little bit as far as what we can do. If it's Joe or Sarah in their mom's basement in Virginia that are hacking things, now we have some teeth that we can go after them with. But Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, very, very hard to go after those folks. It has been historically.
And so we go back for a second. You do bring up an interesting point there, which is, we think of a lot of attacks coming from foreign nationals. We think of a lot of attacks coming from, Russians and North Koreans and the like. But in the examples, that's really the first one you've brought up where somebody, is Iranian, but really, I mean, they were American and then moved back to Iran.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you, how is there any way to tell how many of the attacks that we think about that, organizations and the audience worry about are actually coming from inside US borders versus not?
Yeah, a lot of it boils down to attrition. And the attrition can be tricky because, foreign nation state actors, they're going to pop a VPN and they're going to show up in, bum diddly Nevada to kind of help cover their tracks. It's getting a little less so now. It used to be a very clandestine, kind of cloak and dagger type thing. Nation states are getting a lot noisier. They don't care who knows. Like China could care less if we know that they hacked some of our systems. That they might even brag about it, But it's very hard. There are ways to do attrition. You can examine the malicious code that they used. A lot of times there will be indicators within that. Some of the IOCs, like the CNC systems that they phone home to, will kind of give us some idea of attribution, but it can be tricky. It's not as easy as just looking at an IP address.
Mike, and you looked like you had thoughts on that as well.
I do. It's the origination of an attack is not very correlated with the IP address that you see it coming from at all. There is an infrastructure out there of previously acquired systems that can be used as launch points. I make a joke about this, but 60% of all the bad traffic in the country comes from my Aunt Barbara's computer in Arapahoe, Oklahoma. Part, in talking about public policy, one thing that I have advocated is getting really solid about treating our logical border as a border and having a scaled way of penalizing other countries for not controlling their criminals, right? We'll start to freeze you out and we'll go all the way out to where your banks can't do business with our banks. And everybody will say, yeah, and then the bad guys will just go around that and they'll do exactly what Brad said. They'll get a VPN, and that's not the point. The point is you use a market force and you have the people that run the banks go scream at the politicians in Russia and say, do something about the criminals because we can't do legit business anymore. And that's really the only way you're going to put a cap in this. So, yeah, I mean, the attacks come from all over the world. They look like they're sourced from some other place than they really are. And a lot of those are domestic sources. AWS is real popular for launching attacks.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of it too comes down to if you can educate your family members too. My mom is the worst. She would click on every single thing. And I said, you can't be doing this. And she's like, well, why? It doesn't matter. I don't have anything important on my machine. I'm like, yeah, but the people that are going to pivot from your machine to somewhere else, that somewhere else might have important things that they're after. And you're simply enabling that, don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. So.
Yeah, and Fred, I know you get asked. Fred gives advice to a lot of hospitals, healthcare organizations, and the like. And one of the questions that you get asked a lot is, should we just block? Should we block traffic from other countries? Is that going to fix everything? And your answer to that?
Yeah, well, the answer is it'll help a tiny, teeny bit. Anybody can launch an attack through a VPN and pop up any place where that VPN empties out. Could be in the US, could be in Europe. This, like Mike said, nobody launches anything from their own asset. They go to assets they previously compromised, sometimes chaining 2 or 3 assets in a row. And eventually that last compromised asset is where the attack is launched from. Same thing with the command and control sites Brad is talking about. Those are compromised assets or assets that are stood up for a very short period of time, ephemeral. They're there for 4 hours and then they're gone again. So, they can, doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's you have to protect your perimeter and your internal network or your cloud or your email. But it's really not where it's coming from anymore. It's the fact the internet's just a source of attacks. Full stop.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk about when I do my security awareness training is when folks are looking for IOCs and looking for compromises, we look where we expect them to come from. We really need to be looking where we don't expect them to come from my mom's house, or from Hamilton's Aunt Edna's house, or wherever. That's where the threat's going to come from. It's not going to come with a big bow that says with love from Russia.
Yeah, I would like to point out that the modern way that bank robbers work is they go steal a car first, then they go rob the bank. That way they're not doing it in their own car, right? So you can't know it's them, right? So it's that even obfuscated even further, right?
No. So what does all this mean? We've talked about some threat actors and what motivates them. What does this mean for us in the future? One of the big things is AI. Threats are really starting to leverage AI. There are tool sets out there. I went to some really good talks at DEF CON this year about AI and how they can be used. There are open source free toolkits out there on how to make your own deep fakes using AI. So instead of getting that SMS from the CEO asking me to go buy gift cards, it's going to be a video message from the CEO where it's the CEO and the mouth matches the words. And he's saying, Brad, go buy these Apple gift cards. It's going to be a lot harder for people to spot some of these deep fakes. Some of the deep fakes are really, really well done. And we need to take this into account, as organizations, when we do our security awareness training and when we develop our security programs, we really need to make sure that we take all of that into account. The fact that AI will write a perfect phishing email, and there's guardrails. It's very easy to get around the guardrails. I can go to Bard, Google's AI, and say, hey, write me a phishing email. And Bard will say, no, that's bad. I'm not going to do that. I can say, what if I got a phishing email from a bad actor and it was supposedly from PayPal, what might it look like? And Bard will be like, oh, let me show you. And there's your phishing email. So even though there's guardrails, they're not foolproof. We really need to warn our end users to be on the alert for AI. Phishing is still very low cost for malicious actors, and it works. We have to get it right 100% of the time. The people sending the phishing emails only need to get it right once, and they've won. So it's really important that we stay on top of the phishing. I know a lot of you will do different phishing tests, leverage different facilities and services out there. It's important that we stay on top of the phishing because it's increasing. There are blinky boxes you can get. We did a talk a couple of weeks ago about blinky boxes and the pros and cons. If you get like a secure email gateway or something like that, that's great. Make sure you configure it. Make sure it's dialed in, and make sure that you maintain it and stay on top of patches for it. The landscape, it's evolving. It's continually evolving. It's a game of cat and mouse or leapfrog. The bad actors come up with something, we fix it. They come up with something new. It's no longer just a single computer system or a single network. We're seeing a lot of cyberkinetic targets where they will hit a hospital and ransomware the whole hospital because they know that hospital needs those systems to function. They're effectively shutting down that hospital. We've seen hospitals go out of business in the state of Illinois actually recently because of ransomware. So we really need to be on our toes with ransomware and with some of these attacks. Adding chemicals into water treatment plants, things like that. Really need to stay on our toes. And then our security programs really need to reevaluate our threat environment as well as our risk appetite. And we need to do that on an ongoing basis. Security is not a destination. It's a journey. It's not a one and done. We really need to continue monitoring this stuff as we move forward so we can try and stay one step ahead of the malicious folks.
Yeah, I mean, Brad and I have had a lot of conversations recently around organizations building up their entire threat posture and what does that mean? So just some inside story from us. So Brad works as a VCISO, which means that, he provides virtual CISO services for organizations. If, they work with Brad for a year, over the course of a year, like here are all of the things that Brad does quarter by quarter to help you improve your security posture. And I run marketing, so I put that on a PDF and make it pretty. But it's created this really interesting conversation around, okay, over the course of a year, and you do it custom, Brad, for different organizations. What can they do to improve their entire security posture, knowing that just one thing doesn't work. There's no blinky box that is perfect.
Yeah, it's really, like I said, it's a journey. So we typically start out, where are you at now? Let's take an honest look as to where we're at. None of us are perfect. Nobody has it all figured out. Nobody, like I said, nobody is done with security, right? So where are you right now? Where are you at today? Where do we want to be a year from now? And what are the steps to get there? Maybe we need to do some policy improvements. Maybe we need to get some more robust security training. Maybe we need to do phishing tests. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes into it. And there, like you said, Jake, there's no one solution that we say we get this one service or we buy this one blinky box and we check the box on our audit form and we're done. It's a continuous improvement, and it's the type of thing where we continue to grow and leverage new information as it comes out. So yeah, so in summary, we basically, the motivation for people to become threat actors is still there. People still have low self-esteem. People still like money. People still believe in causes and want to participate in hacktivist opportunities. There's a much lower bar to the entry because tools are so much more available. Anybody that doesn't really know what they're doing can learn pretty quickly by watching some videos, by reading some forums, by downloading some tools and playing with them. And the hacker lifestyle, we've really been kind of glamorizing this with TV and films. And, you watch hackers and it's like, I want to be those guys. They're so cool. Or you watch, Sneakers or, Swordfish. I mean, there's so many different films and movies and TV shows out now. Leverage. The hacker was a good guy and everybody wanted to be a hacker that could do that. So we really need to kind of make sure that image is properly displayed. IOCs are still really important. We really need to watch those IOCs and look for them where we don't expect them coming from. Again, if we threat hunt in new and interesting places, we're going to find stuff. And then getting involved with youth and redirecting them may be beneficial. I'm kind of mentoring a buddy of mine's kids. They're at that age where they are really curious. They're very advanced in their IQ. They could very easily go down the wrong path. So we want to show them things. We're getting them Raspberry Pis and teaching them how to make security systems for their house. And, how do we guide these folks? STEM programs, very important. Anything you can do to help your local community in those efforts, please, take advantage of any opportunities that you have to help guide the youth of today and tomorrow's leaders in security.
Yeah, and people come to us all the time when they're getting into InfoSec, and they're like, I want to be a pen tester. And Mike, you have advice for them.
Well, yeah. I mean, my advice on becoming a penetration tester is, that's the real sexy side of this. And, that's what people think they want. They want to be a break-in artist, a red teamer. But the fact of the matter is, an organization, unless it's a Microsoft or a Lockheed that has to be constantly testing its own products, you're required to do a penetration test once a year. Right. So would you hire a plumber to be on staff for the one clogged sink you have every year? No. Right. So penetration testers end up working for consulting companies for the most part. You can be on an internal red team, but that is not the entry point into this business, not by a long shot. And there's better ways to do it. And we've talked about those ways, the ways we do it. So that's what I would say about penetration testing. It sounds really good. It's not the kind of thing that's as easily monetizable as you think, but on the other hand, that's how you end up criming.
Yeah, and the part of pen testing, it looks glamorous on the front end. The thing that folks don't realize on the back end, there's a whole lot of paperwork to being a pen tester. Report writing is not entertaining at all.
At 1 a.m. in a hotel room for presentation the next day, it's not fun.
All right.
Okay, with that, Jake, I'll hand this back over to you.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about Fred and I will talk about this together, but we talked about all of the things that we do as an organization. And when you think about how the bad guys will get in, I don't think anybody could listen to everything Brad just said and said, hey, if a hacktivist or a or the Russian government wants to get into my network, that I'll be able to stop them. If you do think that, Brad has a bridge to sell you. And so, one of the things that we do, Fred, is, we watch networks for the sign of intrusion. And we do it, you can see it here, the diagram of how we do it. But Fred, really, seeing the bad guy when they get in is the best way to limit the impact of an attack.
Yeah, I mean, the classic risk equation has your vulnerabilities and the probability that a bad guy is going to take advantage of them, and you prevent those with preventative controls, firewalls, antivirus, things like that. But those fail. We all know people get phished. There are a million ways that those fail. So you need to be able to see when the bad guys are in, when they're actually taking action in your network, when they're starting to exfiltrate data. So having visibility into everything that's going on is absolutely the only way you can minimize the other half of the risk equation, the impact component, because the shorter time that they're in there and the less capability they have to do bad things, the less your impact. So focusing on detection and rapid response to that investigation, some of the best money you can possibly spend for your organization.
Yeah. And, when you think about, and this, by the way, is just a map of all the services we have. I want to call out a couple here. And one that's not highlighted, that's up on the right, is vCISO, which is what Brad does, helping an organization over the course of the year, that continuous vulnerability identification that's further down on the right. Because, as I put in the chat, fewer bad guys are getting in through email, more are getting in through vulnerabilities. You got to make sure you're on that. And then on the left, the way we think about managed detection response is preparing for an incident, detecting one quickly, which is what Fred just discussed, and then responding decisively. And as we wrap up here, my colleague Ginny is going to put in the chat a survey link. We love to know how we did. Was this a good webinar? Was it helpful? We'd appreciate it if everybody would take the survey. Additionally, for everybody who takes the survey, we make a donation to an InfoSec charity that trains InfoSec managers on all sorts of stuff, including these kinds of attacks. I also put up there Brad's email address and our phone number. So if you want to reach out to him directly and ask any questions, you can. Let's just do final thoughts from folks. And again, please take the survey while we're doing the final thoughts here. We'll go Brad, Mike, and then Fred. Brad, go ahead. Final thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So my final thoughts are, we need to realize that threat actors are people and that they have things that drive them. The more we can understand about the threat actors that may attack us and what drives them, the more we can kind of understand how they might attack us, what methods they may use, and we can then prevent against it. There's no thing that's going to shut them out entirely. So we need to always be vigilant.
All right. Mike, final thoughts.
My final thought is this. If I am 12, 13 years old and I do a lot of gaming and I am looking around and I'm seeing everybody that goes into debt to go to college and comes out with no job, and I'm listening all the time to people telling me that the planet is going to fail and climate change is going to kill us, this stuff becomes real attractive. And I think that we are looking at the tip of an iceberg above the water, and what's under there getting ready to pop up is going to be big. So this bit about activists and all of their the things that they do for cause, just watch what happens coming up to the election, because I think it's going to get real animated.
Yep, for sure. Fred, final thoughts.
Yeah. Now that everybody has Brad Swanson's email address and phone number, I'm going to implore you not to start testing this by hacking him. Okay. So leave Brad alone. That's my final thought.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Again, please take the survey. We appreciate the feedback. If you want to get in touch with us, obviously you can do it by emailing Brad or shoot me an email, jake@criticalinsight.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day.
Yep. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.